I speak now to Dan Perry, an Israeli affairs analyst. He joins us now live from Tel Aviv. Dan, the Israeli military has said that it could take several more months to fully seize Gaza. From what you're seeing and hearing, does the Israeli public have the stamina or the appetite for such a drawn-out campaign?
I think they certainly have the stamina, but just as true is that they do not have the appetite. I'm judging this based on my own conversations with people, and also all the polls show that 70% or more of the people would like the war to end, despite their unhappiness with Hamas having not surrendered. And I think there is increasing talk of how Hamas might be compelled to not only hand over the reins of the Strip, but also disarm after the war ends. It's not a simple question, but there is great disquiet about the idea of occupying Gaza City and maybe thereafter occupying the entire Strip, which would saddle Israel with what would seem to be then an inevitable military administration over some 2 million people who are going to be mostly hostile and who are in terrible shape. And it's extremely unlikely in that scenario that the world would offer much help. There don't seem to be a lot of good outcomes to Israel occupying this territory, and I think Israeli public opinion is well aware of it.
The Gaza City incursion has been met with strong international condemnation, even from Israel's allies. Is this influencing the Israeli public opinion at all, or is the domestic narrative largely dismissing any external criticism?
Look, I mean, a nation at war very rarely is going to, capitulate to foreign interference, especially when, frankly, so much of the international condemnation of Israel is based on a very weak understanding of what's actually happening. And I don't mean a humanitarian disaster in Gaza, which is indisputable, but of the risks of allowing Hamas to remain in charge of this territory, indeed, of how bad that would be for the Gazans themselves. So Israel kind of feels like they're being unfairly judged. This applies also to many people who do oppose the government and would like the war to end. There is a question of whether Israel can much longer withstand pressure coming, for example, from Europe. It's quite popular in Israel and also in the U.S. to dismiss the Europeans as a strategic player. But here are the facts. About a third of Israel's very impressive GDP, at the level of $54,000 a year at this point, I believe, it comes from international trade. And Israel's biggest trading partner is the European Union. About a third of that trade is with the European Union. And the European Union is discussing right now removing trade incentives on much of it, not all of it, but much of it, as a first step. Now, Netanyahu responded to this week in a sort of shocking statement that Israel must accustom itself to international isolation and become a sort of super Sparta. This was met in Israel with great dismay across the body politic, and the press is full of pundits and of politicians and of regular people trying to remind the prime minister that Sparta was ultimately destroyed, and unlike Athens, it left no legacy whatsoever, and basically was built on slave labor and occupation. The fact that Netanyahu, who's not an unintelligent man, who's a very erudite person, would bring that analogy to bear, it just shows how desperate things have become in Israel. But again, none of this is to say that there isn't continued support in Israel for finding a way to remove Hamas from the equation. You know, we're about to see probably a swath of countries recognizing Palestine. But if you recognize Palestine in a way that helps Hamas be stronger, that they get credit for, basically, then that weakens very much the chances that Israel will take the steps, will take the risks needed to pull out of the West Bank and enable that Palestinian state to arise. They will not do this if Hamas remains a factor. Such is the complex equation, such is the very challenging landscape that we face.
Dan, as always, good to get your perspective from inside Israel. Dan Perry, an Israeli affairs analyst, joining us there from Tel Aviv.
Thank you very much.